a man who did not sit behind the wheel of a car until he was 24. A British road racer who had never turned a lap on an oval. A car built in England to crack the most American race on Earth. Put all three together at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 1966, and almost nobody gave them a chance. Yet by the end of that afternoon, Graham Hill had won. And that one victory would become the heart of something no driver has ever matched. This is the 1966 Lola T90. Number 9. The car was a British outsider built to embarrass the home crowd. By the middle of the 1960s, the Indianapolis 500 belonged to America. The brick-lined oval, the heavy front-engined roadsters, and the local heroes who had spent their whole lives turning left. This was their race, on their soil, in their machines. The Lola T90 was none of those things. It was designed in England by Eric Broadley, the brilliant and self-effacing engineer who had founded Lola Cars a few years earlier, and it was wrapped around a light aluminium tub, rather than the tube-frame roadsters the Americans still trusted. The regulations of the day demanded a certain thickness of aluminium, so Broadley built the Monaco from 16-gauge sheet and shaved every other ounce off the car. The suspension was even offset 3 inches to the left, a deliberate trick aimed squarely at a track where every single corner turns the same way. In the back sat the 4-cam Ford V8, the engine that had already begun to break the old roadster stranglehold. Lola had taken its first swing at the Brickyard the year before with the car called the T80, and it had been a humbling failure, late to finish, barely tested, and undone by a suspension flaw that made the thing heave on the way into a corner. Broadley went home, learned the lesson, and came back with the T90 ready early and ready to fight. It was, in every sense, a thoroughbred, a precision instrument sent to do battle against brute force. 3 of these slender machines, finished in red and white, were entered by a young Texas oilman named John Mecom, a wealthy enthusiast who had assembled one of the most professional teams in the paddock. Hill's car wore the colors of the American Red Ball Moving Company. His teammate carried a sponsor called Bose Seal Fast, and a third went to a seasoned local racer. Lola had built its name on nimble, beautifully engineered machines, and Mecom was betting that European precision could finally topple American muscle at the one place it had always reigned. The locals had seen foreign cars come and go before. They had not yet learned to be afraid of them. Number 8. The man driving it almost never became a racing driver at all. Graham Hill is the only name in this story that matters more than the car, so it is worth understanding just how unlikely his presence on that grid really was. He was born in London in 1929 and served in the Royal Navy as an engine room artificer aboard a cruiser, rising to petty officer long before he ever thought seriously about going fast for a living. Then he took up rowing with the London Rowing Club, where between 1952 and 1954 he stroked a crew through the highest level of the sport at Henley, and absorbed a kind of stubborn, never-quit discipline that would define everything he did afterward. Here is the detail that stops people in their tracks. He did not pass his driving test until he was 24. He owned almost nothing. Then, in 1954, he saw an advertisement in a magazine for a racing school at Brands Hatch, offering laps for 5 shillings each. He scraped the coins together, drove 4 laps of the circuit in a small single-seater, and as he put it later, everything changed. He talked his way into work as a mechanic, then talked his way out of the workshop and into a seat. He made his Formula One debut at Monaco in 1958, moved to the British BRM team, and in 1962 he dragged that long-suffering outfit to the Formula One World Championship, a title many had assumed the famously troubled team would never win. It had taken him years of unglamorous testing and development work, the kind most stars avoided, to turn that outfit into a winner. He was never the most naturally gifted driver of his generation, and he knew it. What set him apart was an almost frightening work ethic, an engineer's feel for his machine left over from his Navy days, and the same refusal to give in that rowing had drilled into him. Through all of it, he carried his old club onto the track. That famous dark blue helmet with the white vertical bars was not a stylist's invention. Those bars are oars, the colours of the London Rowing Club, and his son and his grandson would later wear them too. A penniless former sailor who learned to drive in his mid-20s had no business becoming one of the finest drivers on the planet. He did it anyway. Number 7. Indianapolis was the first oval he had ever raced on. Road racing and oval racing are two different sports that happen to share a steering wheel. A Formula One driver brakes, changes down, and threads the car through corners that turn both ways. An oval racer holds the throttle pinned for lap after lap, riding inches from a concrete wall at a speed that never seems to fall, trusting that the car will not choose that exact moment to step out of line. Plenty of road racers who tried the crossover quietly hated it. Graham Hill had never attempted it at all. Indianapolis in 1966 was his first oval race anywhere on Earth, and it just happened to be the single biggest day in all of motorsport. There was a reason the Europeans kept coming. The year before, Jim Clark and Lotus had finally broken through and won the race outright, the first foreign victory in nearly 50 years. And it had sent a clear signal across the Atlantic that the old roadsters were living on borrowed time. The doors were open now, and a wave of Grand Prix talent was arriving each May to take American prize money off the American establishment. The purse on offer dwarfed anything in European racing, and a single strong run at the Brickyard could be worth more than an entire Grand Prix season. For a driver like Hill, who had never been wealthy, the chance was impossible to turn down. John Mecom had signed Hill and his BRM teammate Jackie Stewart, the two of them sharing a hotel room and learning the place side by side as wide-eyed newcomers, while the third Mecom Lola went to the experienced American Roger Ward. On the grid before the start, there are photographs of Eric Broadley, leaning deep into the cockpit of the number 24 car, pointing out to Hill where the instruments actually were because the rookie had barely had time to learn his own dashboard. Hill qualified 15th, well back in the field. He was not a favourite. He was a curiosity, a Formula One champion playing tourist at America's greatest spectacle, and the smart money assumed he would be politely out of his depth long before the finish. Number 6. The race nearly destroyed itself before a single lap was complete. The 50th running of the Indianapolis 500 began with one of the most violent opening moments the Speedway had ever witnessed. The green flag dropped, the 33-car field surged down the main straight for the very first time, and somewhere in that wall of metal, a car broke loose. In the space of a few seconds, a chain reaction crash swallowed 11 cars whole. A full third of the entire field was eliminated before they had completed even one lap. There were spinning machines, flying wheels, and the veteran A.J. Foyt scrambling up the catch fence to escape the wreckage, tearing open his hand as he climbed. Among the cars destroyed in those opening seconds were those of Dan Gurney, Cale Yarborough, and a long list of other established names who had come to win. The race was stopped under a red flag for an hour and a half, while the crews swept the track clear and the survivors crawled back to reform. There was a grim history haunting all of this too. The American Red Bull Company on the side of Hill's car had sponsored a popular driver named Eddie Sachs only 2 years earlier, and Sachs had been killed in a fiery crash on the second lap of the 1964 race. The speedway in this era could turn deadly in a heartbeat. When the race finally restarted, it had already become a war of attrition. Engines let go, gearboxes failed, and the early favourites fell away one after another through the long afternoon. Mario Andretti, the fastest man all month in practice, led early and then dropped out with a broken valve before a quarter of the race had run. One by one, the cars the crowd had come to cheer for coasted silently to a halt. By the time it was over, only 7 cars were still running, the smallest number of finishers the race has ever recorded. To win this thing, you did not simply have to be quick, you had to survive a battlefield. And most of the favourites were already sitting in the infield watching their wrecked cars get towed away. Number 5. For most of the afternoon, the story was not Graham Hill at all. Here is the part the history books tend to skim over. Hill did not dominate this race, he did not lead from the front and stamp his authority on the field. The lead changed hands again and again through the afternoon, and as the race wore on, the man who pulled clear in a Mecom Lola was the other rookie, Jackie Stewart. The young Scot had taken to the speedway with the same fearless, ice-cold composure that would later carry him to 3 world championships, and over the closing stints he had driven away from what was left of the field. Where Hill was methodical, Stewart was electric, hustling the Lola through the turns with a natural speed that made the old hands take notice. By his own account, in the closing stages he was leading by almost 2 full laps. It was his race. Everyone in the grandstands and everyone along the pit wall could see it. Stewart was about to win the Indianapolis 500 at his very first attempt in a British car, in front of an American crowd that had paid to watch its own heroes. The 2 roommates had arrived together as complete unknowns, and now one of them was about to walk straight into American racing folklore, while the other settled for a quiet supporting role. Graham Hill, running a steady and unspectacular race some distance back, looked set to be little more than a footnote, a solid result for the newcomer and nothing that anyone would remember. He was driving well within himself, never putting a wheel wrong, doing exactly what a wise rookie should do at a track that punished every mistake. With under 10 laps to go, the only real question left seemed to be the size of Stewart's winning margin. Or so it looked. If you're enjoying this one, take a second to subscribe to the channel, because forgotten stories like this are exactly what we dig into every single week. Number 4. 8 laps from glory, the engine let go. With roughly 8 laps remaining, Jackie Stewart's Lola began to trail a faint haze of smoke. An oil scavenge pump, the small component responsible for feeding oil to the top of the engine, had quietly failed. The pressure dropped away, and Stewart was left facing the worst decision a leading driver can face. Press on and detonate the engine within sight of the flag, or shut it down and surrender a race he had owned from almost the very start. He shut it down. He coasted into the pit lane, climbed out and walked back along the apron on foot, while the race he had controlled all afternoon carried on without him. That left a single Mecom Lola still circulating near the front, the number 24 American Red Bull car of Graham Hill. The man who had quietly sidestepped every disaster, kept his nose clean through all the chaos, and stayed on the lead lap while flashier drivers threw their afternoons away, suddenly found himself in front with the finish in sight. He held the lead through the final laps and took the checkered flag, then drank the traditional bottle of milk in victory lane as the first rookie to win the Indianapolis 500 since a man named George Souders had managed it back in 1927. And then comes the cruel twist buried in this story. Stewart, who had led almost the entire way and broken down within touching distance of victory, was the one voted Rookie of the Year. Hill, the man who actually won the race, was also a rookie. The award went to the driver who lost. Number 3, to this day, people still argue about who really won. Graham Hill's name is on the Borg-Warner Trophy, and officially he is the winner of the 1966 Indianapolis 500. But there is a corner of the sport that has never accepted it. The defending champion that year was Jim Clark, Hill's great rival and, in the eyes of many, the most naturally gifted driver who ever lived. Clark had won this very race the year before, becoming the first non-American to take it in nearly half a century, and in 1966 he was scored in second place. The trouble is that Clark spun his Lotus twice during the race without striking anything at all. A piece of car control so improbable that even hardened American observers were left shaking their heads, and in the confusion of those spins, the lap scoring descended into chaos. Team Lotus had brought their own official scorer over from the Royal Automobile Club in Britain and stationed him in their pit. Their lap charts, they insisted to anyone who would listen, clearly showed Clark ahead of Hill when the flag fell. One theory holds that another car, painted in colours almost identical to Clark's, crashed late in the race, and the scorers simply mixed the two up, docking Clark a lap he had never actually lost. To this day, there are respected voices in motorsport who will tell you flatly that the wrong man's face sits on that trophy. The Lotus team believed Clark had finished a lap ahead, yet its entrants chose not to lodge an official protest, and the formal dispute quietly faded, even as the conviction behind it never did. Hill himself could not have cared less about the argument. As far as the officials were concerned, he had crossed the line first, he had drunk the milk, and he had banked the winner's check. The debate has rumbled on for 60 years. What nobody disputes is the name engraved on the trophy. Number 2. The Indy win was only one piece of a far larger puzzle. Step back from that single afternoon and the true significance of the Lola T90 begins to come into focus. Winning the Indianapolis 500 at the first attempt would be the achievement of a lifetime for almost any driver alive. But for Graham Hill, Indy was not the summit of anything. It was a building block. By the time he stood in victory lane at the Brickyard, he had already won the Formula One World Championship back in 1962 with BRM, and he had already conquered the brutal street circuit at Monaco more than once, a race he would eventually win a record 5 times on his way to the nickname Mr. Monaco. So as he calmly drank his milk that day, he had quietly gathered 2 of the 3 hardest single events in the whole of motor racing. And the thing that makes this so remarkable is that those events could not be more different from one another. Monaco is a test of precision, a slow and unforgiving street circuit where the smallest mistake ends your day against a barrier. The Indianapolis 500 is a test of nerve and raw speed, 500 miles flat against the wall. The 24 hours of Le Mans is a test of endurance, a brutal day and night ordeal that breaks cars and drivers in equal measure. 3 completely separate skill sets, 3 different worlds. Hill had now mastered 2 of them. Only 1 prize remained, and he went after it almost at once. Just 3 weeks after his Indianapolis triumph, he lined up at Le Mans in a Ford GT40, only for a front suspension failure to wreck his chances. The final piece would not fall easily. It would take him another 6 long years to claim it. And by then, almost everyone in the sport assumed his best days were already behind him. Number 1, he became the only man in history to win the Triple Crown of Motorsport. In June of 1972, at the age of 43, well past the point where most drivers have long since retired, Graham Hill folded himself into a Matra Simca MS670 alongside a young Frenchman named Henri Pescarolo and drove through the night at Le Mans. It was his 10th appearance at the great endurance race, and his partner privately doubted whether a veteran with so many miles behind him still carried the hunger for it. Most men in his position would have been more than content to protect a legacy that was already complete. Hill could not leave that final jewel sitting there unclaimed. The Matra effort was enormous, with several new cars thrown at the race, and the field had opened up after Ferrari withdrew its factory team. When the sun rose and the 24 hours were finally complete, the Matra had won. And with that single result, Graham Hill had done something that has never been done by another human being before or since. He had won the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indianapolis 500, and the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The 3 crown jewels of the entire sport, gathered by one man across 3 utterly different disciplines. They call it the Triple Crown of Motorsport, and Graham Hill is still the only name ever attached to it. Great drivers have chased it and come up short. Fernando Alonso won Monaco and Le Mans, then chased the Indianapolis 500 for years without ever cracking it. Juan Pablo Montoya won Monaco and Indianapolis, but never conquered Le Mans. More than half a century has now passed, the sport has produced dozens of legends, and the list still holds exactly one name. The man who could not drive until he was 24, who learned the craft for 5 shillings a lap, who wore a rower's oars on his helmet, finished his career as the most complete racing driver the world had ever seen. His son Damon would go on to win the Formula One championship as well, making the Hills the first father and son ever to do it. But even that could not match what the old man had built. Versatility on that scale simply does not exist in the modern era, where drivers spend entire careers locked inside a single category, and it may never exist again. And the car that delivered the hardest, most improbable jewel of that crown, the win that nobody saw coming on the most American day in all of racing, was a slim, red and white machine assembled in a workshop in England, the 1966 Lola T90. Graham Hill died in 1975, far too soon, when the light aircraft he was flying came down in heavy fog on the way home from a test session. But the helmet with the rowing stripes never lost its meaning, and the record he set that decade has never once been touched. If you enjoyed this story and you want more forgotten history from motor racing's golden age, consider subscribing. We'll see you in the next one.